Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Michelle Vaysaga and I am the crafty chick behind Shells Beads. Today's tutorial is a super bright, colorful, and fun rainbow inspired tumbler that I really wanted to put out there. I have been a lifelong doodler, and yes, I do believe that doodling should be a profession, because I definitely know that if it were, I would have a PhD in doodling. My teachers can attest to that fact because I think I doodled more on the margin of my test papers than I did actually writing on the test. So, the inspiration behind this tutorial is my love for Zentangle, which is a concept where you doodle and you don't take your pen off of the paper. However, what we're doing today breaks a little bit of those rules because you will be using some of the Zentangle design concepts, but we are just trying to pump this rainbow tumbler up, add some really beautiful intricate designs, a splash of glitter, and I just think you guys are going to love it. So this is the cup that we are going to be working on today, guys, and I call it my Rainbow Zentangler Tumbler. I absolutely love all of the interest, the geometrics behind it, and the beautiful rainbow color. So if you guys are ready to get started, let's go. I will have all the materials listed and linked in the description box below, and you might even find a couple of discount codes as well. You want to make sure you're starting out with a fully prepped and sanded cup and that it's base painted with flat white by Rust-Oleum 2 times. The next step will be to add our stencils, which we will be using this fine line tape from Scotch to create. These are going to create our sections that later on when we remove the tape will give us that geometric feel and areas that we can add our doodling to. The widths that I used are 1/4 inch and 1/8 of an inch. This is going to be important later because I made a couple of boo-boos when I was trying to find the best ink medium to use to create my colorant, and I'll explain that a little later. So this is the step where we are kind of mapping out our little sections. You want to be careful that you don't create too many small areas because we really want to have enough of a palette in each section that we are able to have the space to create. Here you see me trimming any unnecessary pieces of tape, and it is just a great tape to work with. It allows you to get those really fine cuts and not have to worry about marking up your cup. We're going to move on to our 1/8, and this is going to further section out these larger sections that we have. And you want to just be careful that this is random. I had to kind of move myself around and kind of figure out where I wanted the tape lines to go because you don't want to create too much of a repeated pattern. The key to this design really is randomness. So now we're going to move on to adding our alcohol ink colorants. You're going to want some brushes. I use these watercolor brushes that you can fill, only I fill them with 91% alcohol. I'm using a pipette to go ahead and get that alcohol down in there. And basically what this does is act like a built-in blending solution so that when I'm applying my colors, I can also have something in there to blend with. There can be a little bit of backflow, so just keep that in mind, and if you have to change it out between colors, then do so. I have 2 brushes here, but I mainly used the thicker one and just kept that one on the side for little details. The colors that I'm using are chili pepper, Valencia, Dijon, lettuce, stream, wild plum, and boysenberry. These are beautiful, rich jewel tones that are perfect for this time of year. You can see me here with these little shot glasses. I got these at Dollar Tree, and I am just going to be putting a little bit of ink in the bottom of each one of these cups. The good thing about doing it this way is even when the ink dries, you can go back in later and reconstitute it with alcohol, and it's perfectly usable. I'm going to come in and just make sure that my brush gets started and that I have some alcohol in that cup. I'm going to squeeze a little bit out, and then I'm going to come in and start applying my inks. I do this in a very random fashion. I'm just kind of mooshing the paint on there, making sure that I get it really good around those tape lines because we don't want any white additional from where those tape lines are to show through. I'm also taking care to kind of look at my spacing and make sure that I have enough room to move on to the next color. We will be blending these colors slightly together. So what you're going to want to do next after you have your first color applied is go ahead and rinse that brush off just a little bit with the alcohol, just so that you can make sure that you're starting with a clean brush. The cool thing about alcohol is, if you see, I went back in and re-dipped my brush, and it creates all of these interesting cells within a single color. I've gone ahead and sped up the next portion of this so you can see me get through all of these colors, but I go in and I apply these colors slightly overlapping the last one, and then come in with just some plain alcohol and blend those lines just a little bit so that we don't have such a hard edge. Alcohol ink is very forgiving in that pretty much anything you do to it is going to turn out looking good. So we're just going to keep applying the colors down the cup until we get to the bottom. Just start right in with that green, overlapping where that yellow is enough that we can blend those two colors together. Lettuce is a beautiful autumn and winter sage green, and it's one of my favorites in more of the jewel tone palette, and one that really looks beautiful with this design. Okay, and I'm just trying to come down far enough that I picked up a and I did squeeze a little bit of alcohol from the brush, and we are going to come right in to our wild plum. This is another beautiful deep tone, and as you can see, we are going to be layering this very close to that stream. It's going to give us a beautiful middle tone. I'm even going to come in with a little stream here and there and just kind of add to this color, because this is the one color I couldn't find to actually blend and make ahead of time. So I kind of made it all on my own using a blending technique with these two colors. Don't be afraid to mix your palettes up a little bit, particular steps. In fact, pretty much anything you do using this kind of dabbing method is going to look good when you're done. Let's hit all the interest on this cup already, and we haven't even really begun to come in and clean. Once we have the body of the cup finished, we want to come in and repeat that rainbow pattern on our handle. I just come back into my cups and I pick up some of that color that we have left over and get it on the handle. I really like how this is a little bit more organic than the body of the cup, and I love how the colors blended for this. You're going to continue all the way down the handle, keeping in that color pattern, and then we're going to work on the bottom of the cup. This is a good time to let you know that I did get some bleed through under this tape, and really I'm not sure how much of it was actually the alcohol ink or a boo-boo I made by getting frustrated with another ink that I attempted to use and then just spraying over top of it to avoid having to reset my tape lines. So I'm gonna actually go back to the drawing board on that one. But don't worry about any bleed through that we have with the alcohol ink, because we will finish that in a later step. To get the bottom of the cup, we're just going to apply a little bit of that wild plum to our alcohol brush and just smoosh it all over the bottom. This is not going to have a design on it, so it's really easy to do that. Now we're going to move on to the epoxy method. We are going to be applying less than 1 milliliter of epoxy to this and then adding our chunky glitter. For this, I'm adding Chaos Glitter's Starlight, and this is a beautiful hollow blend that has some 5-point stars in it, and it really just adds a little bit to this design. So you guys might notice that the white lines are no longer white. So this happened when I went to apply the epoxy, and it looks like either that wild plum or that boysenberry kind of bled up into the body of the cup. To avoid that, you are going to want to seal this with Rust-Oleum 2x clear gloss first before moving on to your glitter step. I wish I had thought to do that before, but this is actually the first time I've ever had a bleed out like this. So we live and learn and we roll with it. So I noticed as I was applying the glitter that I had missed a couple of spots around the handle with the epoxy. That is something I tend to do a lot of when I'm working with handled cups. So just make sure that you're taking time and care to get all those little areas. I come in, fix them up, and just dazzle some glitter over that area, and everything turned out fine. Now I'm going to move on with a finer cut of glitter called Ermagerd from Peachy Olive Glitters, and this was in the same flash family as the Starlight, and it's also what I'm going to use for the bottom and the handle. I don't really want there to be any chunky glitter on that handle or on the bottom because it's just very hard to epoxy later, so this was the perfect filler color to add to this cup. Make sure to tap off your cup when you're done with this step so that you remove any loose glitter. Once we're done with that, we're going to come in, and I'm using kind of a hybrid rolling pin method to do this. Obviously, it's a handled cup, so we wouldn't be able to roll this all the way around. So you're just going to want to pick up the parchment paper like you see me doing here and gently press and kind of roll the cup until all of those stars and that chunky glitter is laying flat. You don't want it completely burnished, but you definitely don't want there to be an issue when you go to epoxy later. Now we're going to move into our first coat of epoxy, and for that I'm using 20 milliliters of tumbler coating epoxy from the Epoxy Resin store. After this coat has cured for 4 to 6 hours, I go directly in with a second coat. I don't bother with anything else because I really want to get layers built up on this cup pretty quickly so that I can get to my doodle designs. Now that both layers of our epoxy are cured, we are ready to move on to our doodle designs. We're going to come in with a Posca paint pen. I will have the one that I used here listed and linked below. This kind of went out of frame a little bit, but it goes from a 0.9 millimeter to a 1.3 millimeter nib, depending on how hard you're pressing on it. So you're going to shake it up and prime it first. This marker is already primed, so I only had to shake it. And when you go to prime the tip, you're just going to want to press it on a piece of paper until you see the paint flow. So the first design that we are going to do, since this was a rainbow cup, are these beautiful Zen arcs. Basically, you're going to start at the corner and alternate by going into the middle of each of those arcs as you draw them on and connecting them in this arc fashion. If you come to an area where you don't have enough space to use the tip of your marker, you can just add a little dot and it will kind of be like a faux arc. So just kind of move along. Obviously, these are very irregular sections that we made. So you are going to have to modify your design just slightly because you're going to be working with all of these odd angles. You'll see me filling up the space here with all of these doodles, and I do have to shake my pen from time to time to make sure that I am not having an issue with paint flow. Once I have that done, I'm going to move on to other sections in my cup. I made the decision to not fill every section with a design, but however you want to do this is completely up to you. I will link some of these inspirations for where I got my doodle designs in the description box below, and make sure to join my Facebook group because I will also have a Zen doodle chart up there as well that I will be working on this weekend. So this section here, I wanted to kind of show you how you can really create almost like a faux peekaboo look in your doodles. A lot of Zen doodles use high contrast to get the look that they are going for. So for this, you see me drawing circles and little cow print splotches, and then I will be coloring in using the white marker all around it. You see me doing that here, and it's just kind of a fun way to use those little circles that you did as the little windows to the glitter and the color below. What I'm doing now is going back through my first couple of layers that I did, and if you notice the white is a little translucent, so I'm coming back in and just making sure that these lines are more opaque so that they stand up underneath our coats of epoxy. Remember, epoxy is kind of like a magnifier, so if it's too translucent, then your design will kind of get lost. In any of my little squares that I'm not sure what to do with, I just add a whole bunch of doodle dots. I just wanted to keep showing you guys some of the different designs that I used for this tumbler. I'm really not going to go into any kind of explanation because I will have those charts done. But if you're having trouble figuring out what to do, just start drawing lines. I promise you, once you get started and you get a feel for doodling, it will come second nature to you as you move on. Another tip, if you feel like you have space to fill in, a really good way to do that is just by adding a random series of dots to those areas. And it really kind of ties designs together, especially if you are looking for part of your design to stand out like I did here with these triangles. We are just going to keep filling up sections here, adding our different doodles. I chose kind of a patchwork pattern, so each one of our sections that we have chosen to add a design to is going to be a different Zen doodle or a Zentangle. You could do yours all the same. You could even only do certain colors and fill in just those areas. It's really up to you. This is one of those tumblers that is so easy to personalize and make your own. Here's an example of all of my finished areas on the cup, and I will end up going back over just a couple of them to make sure that I have darkened up my lines enough, like you see me doing here. I just want to make sure that we have that beautiful contrast before we go into any layers of epoxy. Take your time now to inspect your cup and make sure everything is looking the way you would like it to, because this is kind of going to be it for our design. We really won't be able to tweak this any further once we get our epoxy on the cup, so make sure you're happy with all of your placement. At this time, if you did want to remove anything, you could 100% do that simply by taking a toothbrush with a little bit of water and removing any sections that you didn't want. Now I'm going to be coming in with 15 milliliters of my epoxy and getting this on my cup. I really love how this turned out. I am so excited to see these lines under epoxy. It really kind of brings this design together when you see how the epoxy magnifies all of your doodles. Because your doodles are separated from that base design by a couple layers of epoxy, this layer of adding epoxy really adds to that depth and kind of lifts your doodles a little bit from that base. Once this coat had cured for 4 to 6 hours, I went ahead and came right back in with another coat of epoxy just to make sure that everything was smooth before I did any sanding. Okay. Now that I've got my cup ready for the final stage, this is where I'm cleaning up my lines. So originally I did not want to use any vinyl on this cup, but because I couldn't get those white lines to stay white because my alcohol ink bled, I decided to come in with strips of white Oracal 651 vinyl and go over all of those lines that we created with the tape just to give us that stark contrast. So a little tip here, all you have to do is cut your strips to the same width as the strips of the tape and you will be good to go. So for my thicker lines, they are 1/4 inch strips. So in Cricut, I went ahead and took a square, made it into a rectangle and did a 1/4 inch wide by 11 inches long, duplicated that several times, and then went back and did the same thing for my 1/8 inch strips as well. Here, I'm just trying to utilize my vinyl and not have a lot of waste. So I'm taking a look at areas where I can apply those excess pieces, especially to some of the smaller ones. You also see me coming in here and trying to follow the lines of my designs to determine where I cut those vinyl lines off. Don't worry about the top because on the top we will be doing a different method to trim that. I'm coming in with my thinner 1/8 strips and just going over those lines. Because vinyl tends to build up quickly, I don't really like any of the lines to overlap because I want a really flat finish to this. I'm just basically mimicking those white tape lines that I would have had if that paint hadn't bled. This is an idea of how the whole cup looks now that we've covered all of those tape lines. And now I'm going to show you a better close-up of how I do this trick. So this was developed by Megan Fowkes of Woolly Bear Designs. I'll have her social media listed and linked in the description box below. But you're going to take a number 11 blade from your craft knife and you're going to hold it on top of a credit card and run your cup along that blade like you see me doing here. And what that will do is remove a very, very fine line of all of those pieces of vinyl and give us that perfect space to have our final coats of epoxy adhere to. So here we go. We are moving into our final coats of epoxy. This cup took 3 final coats to get completely smooth, mainly because of that vinyl, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't have any lifting or any kind of issues where all of those little pieces meet each other, since we did not intersect anything. So you just see me here applying this in between coats. I did let them cure for 4 to 6 hours. And after each coat, I do let it sit for about 10 minutes and then come in with my torch and hit it to pop any bubbles. That's it, guys. We are completely done with this cup. I had so much fun showing you how to turn your cup into a canvas and create lots of fun doodle art. If you guys like this video, please give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, comment down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you as always. If you like this video and would like to watch one of my others, just click here and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, guys, stay creative.